So this is what a lot of players will do, is they'll have an instinct of what the first move will be, and they'll play it without perhaps seeing the full variation. And that's sometimes the main reason why problems are solved incorrectly. Today we're going to do LeChess.org puzzles. It's very similar to chess.com practice trainer, where we get a rating, and the goal today will be to get as many problems correct as possible and to get the highest rating as possible. And we'll all work together. We'll go through. It's going to give a variety of problems. I think the more we solve, the harder it will get. So it will probably start out relatively easy, but then hopefully towards the end, it will become a lot more difficult. This one's white to move. You already see it? Yep. Okay. Yes? Queen e6. I think queen e6 is very simple. Simply double attacking the king and the bishop. Now, one piece of advice when you're doing these puzzles, there's no time limit. And I always try and reinforce this with students is accuracy is a lot more important than speed. So when you think you have the solution, you should try and visualize it, see if there's any defense. I think this is very simple. We just, we're going to pick up the bishop and go up material, and we take the bishop. Very nice. So we officially have a puzzle rating. I don't know if you guys can see this. We gained 260 points for solving that puzzle. When we first start out, we're playing from this new account. The first several puzzles, if we get correctly, the rating will increase at a much more rapid pace. So it could get more difficult relatively quickly. We'll continue. Okay, so queen f7, white to move, what to do? And for some of these, I'll be thinking too. Yep. Rook f6, I think, again, very simple. We just pin the queen, and we're going up material. I like it. Take. Very nice. We'll continue. White to move. I think this one is deceivingly easy. What's the move? Yeah, like you might assume that the bishop can't be taken because of the pin, but we can just take it with the queen. And this actually came from a game. Most of these puzzles are generated through games played on LeChess. And we can see the player playing black here is rated just below 2,000 and played knight e4, not realizing the bishop could be taken. So white is just going up a piece, and yeah, very nice. We'll continue from here. Okay, things are getting messy. White to move. I'll have to be thinking here too. Maybe it's still relatively simple, yeah?
Knight takes f2.
Yeah, knight take f2, knight take f2, rook take f2.
Bishop takes e2.
There's also bishop take e2. This is a bit peculiar. So there's maybe two potential options. We should start by counting material here. Because material-wise, black is up 2 pawns, right? Well, rooks are currently equal. So we could take the rook or knight. It seems like both moves win material. Do you have a thought?
No, bishop takes e2, then white can play knight takes, no.
Yeah.
Then black can play
Knight take d3, right?
Yeah.
And
Or actually you can play knight d2, but then you hang your f2 knight. So you have to play knight.
there's knight d2 possibilities.
Yeah, so you have to first take knight takes d3 and then knight d2. After the bishop takes d3.
Yeah, well, I think after bishop take e2, knight take d3, black is doing fine with material because white won the exchange, rook for knight. But because black has, what, 2 pawns and some active pieces, knight d2 is a threat, white probably doesn't want to go into that line. And I think it's much more effective for white just to take on f2.
If we play knight takes f2 and then black plays knight d2.
Ah, knight d2. Then we take the rook. So yeah, knight take f2, we win more material and we're simplifying. Because we're still attacking the rook. There's going to be trades. Let's go ahead and do this. Hopefully it's not incorrect. Yeah, we're just trading on f2. And in the final position, white's up a bishop for 2 pawns. But the 2 bishop advantage is really nice here for white. So we're 4 out of 4. We're up to 1974. I'm sure the puzzles are going to start getting more difficult. Let's continue here. Pawn d6. This is actually, I think, a somewhat common opening trap. I see it right away, but anyone want to suggest a move? Yep. Oh, no. Yes.
Bishop takes b4, knight takes
Queen
queen to a4, and then
a4. Yeah, so this is a nice kind of just forcing combination where we trade on b4, we check on a4, we double attack the knight and the king, and when the knight moves back to c6, the knight is pinned, and we have the final move, pawn d5. And I'm pretty sure there's just no way for black to get out of this without losing a minor piece. Let's go ahead and do that. Take, queen a4, and d5. Now, if the queen were on, let's say, b5, black could sometimes get counterplay with a6 to attack the queen, but in this case, there's no good way for black to attack the queen after d5. And, ooh, knight d7. So if we take the knight, there's knight c5, and then we can just retreat the queen, and we're still up a piece. Yeah. OK, so far so good. Continue training. Congratulations, we broke 2,000. I think the next step is to break 2,100. And there's less fluctuation the more problems we solve. So you already have an idea?
Yeah.
OK.
Rook
Rook
e2.
e2.
Because you're on bishop moves, you play bishop f7 or 2.
Yeah, so this position, it's actually about making multiple threats. Rook e2 has the simple threat of rook take b2 and also threatening bishop to f2. I was working earlier with the students, and we were talking about identifying targets in the position. I think positions like this, it's really important to identify potential targets, especially in white's position, because the bishop is undefended, the rook is undefended, the king is somewhat exposed. And sometimes if you have trouble finding a tactic, or maybe not seeing all the tactics in your own games, you want to identify targets, because those are usually clues which will lead you to finding the best move. In this case, rook e2 should just be winning material. White plays rook take f5. Now the question is, do we take the bishop or do we take the rook? Just take the rook, probably, yeah. It's just more valuable, and black will be up the exchange. Very nice. OK, we'll move on. That was problem number 6, so we're continually gaining points. Black to move in this position. Right off the bat, I'm realizing black is down 3 pawns, so tactics are necessary to find here. OK, yeah.
Rook e8.
Rook e8. Very simple move, threatening the back rank mate. The problem with a move like rook e8 is white could just defend against a threat. Like white could probably play g3 or h3, creating some escape square for the king. And I'm not sure how powerful that would be. Of course, a major theme in this position is the potential for back rank mate. The fact that this rook is tied down to defending mate. And it is a possible theme in this position. But I wouldn't be entirely confident with rook e8. So I think this is the first problem where most people are a bit stumped. I think I'll go ahead and try and explain my thought process here, unless you have an idea.
How about queen D3?
Queen g3 is definitely a candidate move which came to mind. The issue is I don't think you have a threat here. Even if I give you another move in a row, what would you play after queen d3?
I mean, white after that?
Yeah, of course you have the idea.
Do a backhand check.
Right. So if queen d3, white could spend some time to play h3, and the rook is defended. So I think I'll go ahead and try and explain my thought process. Is in this position, we would like to distract the rook, but I don't see anything that effective. So I think what we can do is focus on a different target in the position, and a very important target to identify is the f2 pawn. And the fact that we could, we have a candidate move here, rook b f8, which is a simple attack against the pawn. If we can take the pawn, I think very good things will happen. And I'm not entirely sure if white has any good way to defend the pawn. Is this what you were going to say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't play f3.
So yeah, exactly. Rook f8. If white plays f3, then we can play your move, queen take g2. Then the rook would be defending, supporting the queen on g2. So rook f8, we should try and at least find some defense for white. It looks like the only defense of the pawn would be to play rook f1. And then we should probably keep calculating. Is there a continuation after rook f8, rook f1? Yep.
Like, is it like you take the rook and then
I think I'll go ahead and show, we're going to take the pawn on f2. So rook f8, rook f1, and this is about finding forcing moves. In this case, we're going to continue with forcing moves, then just capture the pawn on f2 with the e rook, because after rook take f2, black's threatening mate on g2 again, and if rook take f2, we have queen b1, which is a really nice resource in the position, leading to this back rank mate. So let's play it out. I'm relatively confident in this. So that after, white plays a different move, queen d5. Didn't see coming. It's attempting to defend the g2 pawn, but I assume we can just take, and white should be in trouble. Let's go for taking. Aha. Sometimes this will happen when you're doing the puzzles. You'll be confident in a move, and then it'll play out a line that you don't expect, and then we have to keep thinking. In this case, we would love to play rook g2, but the queen is defending against rook g2. So what would another candidate move be in this position? You know what? I'm actually realizing I think we can still play rook g2. Because if, let's calculate a bit deeper, queen take g2, rook take g2, king take g2, we have queen c2 check, double attack. And if the king runs to f1 or h1, we're going to keep checking and taking pawns. This is a common mistake which some people fall into when it comes to solving these tactical exercises, which I almost made myself, where I considered rook g2 and I rejected it too early. A very common mistake, even in tournament play, where if you reject a move too early without digging deeper, sometimes you'll miss opportunities. In this case, rook g2, we don't want to reject too early. We dig deeper, and yeah, we have this really nice queen c2 move, and the resulting endgame is just winning for black, queen versus rook. Okay, that was probably the toughest one so far. Any questions about that? Just to recap, rook f8, not the easiest first move to consider, but the other key line was after rook f1, the idea was to take, and queen b1 with force mate. Any questions? Let's move on. Okay, we have 7 down. We're about 20 minutes in. And we broke 2100. Congratulations. So I will say, I do puzzles occasionally for my own account on Lichess. And my puzzle rating is, I think, just over 2300. So I think one of the goals should be to pass 2300. So on the way, perfect so far. Black to move. Weird position. I think the major question here is, can we just simply take the bishop? And sometimes this will happen in these puzzles, is where the best move could be obvious, but sometimes there's tricks. And it's up to us to make the decision. How many people would like to take the bishop? How many people have this as like their first impression? I mean, I would fit in that group, most certainly. Just take the bishop. I don't see how white is getting counterplay. And this is very much like a game situation where sometimes you can take a free piece, but before you take the piece, you have to ask yourself, does the opponent have any counterplay? In this case, if we take, the only counterplay I see is pawn take pawn. And then we might just like to play king h8. E6. So take, take. And then there's a trick here where if we take the pawn, there'd be discover check. So I think king h8 would keep the king safe. And I think black is doing very well there. I mean, black is up a bishop, and the knight is about to come to e5, which is such a strong piece in terms of attacking and defending. So let's go ahead. And yeah, this is probably the key moment where it might seem attractive just to take the pawn back. But this is very common in chess where we don't take the pawn and we play king h8 to leave the pawn sheltering the black king. In this case, there's no follow-up for white. Knight e5 is coming. Make sense to everyone? Okay, let's continue. Gained another 22 points there. Pawn g6. I see the move right away. This is a classic pattern. Leave it up to you guys. I think I see the move right away. Sometimes you can't get too cocky. Yeah? Queen d4. This is another one of these cases where you just want to identify the targets, the undefended pieces. On b6? Yeah, and sometimes like you'll identify multiple targets. Everything highlighted in red is a potential target, even the king. And sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out the right tactics or the right targets to exploit with tactics. In this case, queen d4 I think is very simple. I saw this right away, but then I realized bishop take f3 could be a move. But then we can take the rook. And we're just winning material, and it should be right. And we take the rook. I don't think there's any counterplay for black. And after we take the rook, we're threatening bishop h6, as well as just taking the bishop. Okay, very nice. We'll continue. Rook b7. Interesting. You see it right away? Yeah, there's a move that's screaming to be played, and then I think it's a matter of calculating. Yeah. Rook take g2, king take g2, and then bishop d5, yeah. And it's very important we play bishop d5 first, and we don't trade the rooks first. Right? So take, take. We don't want to trade the rooks, because this endgame could be a bit unclear. We're not actually going up material. But if we take on g2 and then play bishop d5 first, black is just up a bishop for a pawn. So rook take g2, this is classic. This is a target, this is a target. Wide open position, bishop d5, screaming to be played. And of course we should take with the bishop and not the rook. And take the knight, okay. So that was satisfying. Gaining more points. Perfect so far. And I will say it's better to remain perfect than to get through more problems quickly. I think I already made that point, but when you do these on your own, it's okay to spend maybe like 5, 10, 20 minutes if you're stuck on a problem than to just try and guess, because that's how you get the most amount of value from it. Okay, some endgame problem. White to move, I think it's just a simple tactic. Do you see it? Yeah?
Rook F7.
Rook F7, double attack. I don't think there's anything stronger. Let's go for that. Now this is actually an interesting scenario where if we take the bishop, how many people would just take the bishop? Or that would be your first instinct. That would be my first instinct. But you would play F3. We have to realize that if we take the bishop right away and then king take d5, it could be a really hard endgame to win because we have one pawn left, and if it gets traded off, rook and knight versus rook is usually just a draw. Yeah. So I think knight f6 is a very strong move to keep the initiative, defend the pawn, and then we'll probably take the bishop the next move, and then we'll have the very strong pass d pawn. Does that make sense to everyone? Knight f6, kind of an important in-between move. Don't take the bishop right away. Ooh, the king moves there. Now I think it's time to take the bishop. And the d pawn will allow white to win much more easily. Any questions about that? Let's move on. We can upvote that. This is another feature in Lichess where it's very kind of, what's the right word? Like the problems are generated in terms of the computer basically picks problems where it thinks tactics exist, and then it has a voting system where if you upvote problems, then more users will be likely to do the same problems. Okay, continue. Okay, 95. We're on the verge of breaking 2200. We're 2197, so let's not mess up here. Black to move. Already have an idea? Yep. Rook c2 is definitely an idea that's screaming to be played because the bishop's undefended, the queen is a target. Now I'm wondering, because we have a few options here. We could play rook c2 immediately, or we could take on e5 first and then rook c2. So it's a question, what's the best execution? I think the idea is pretty clear, but how do we execute? Let's imagine rook c2 right away. Is there any problem with that?
Bishop,
Knight takes, and bishop takes b7.
no, queen takes b6 because you're queen.
Wait, you're saying, okay, if knight takes first,
Yeah.
take rook c2. Yeah, I think queen take b6. This could be the problem with taking the knight first.
Rook d8.
There would be the threat of rook d8 mate, and there would be no time to take the bishop on e2. But if we play rook c2 first, we avoid that line. We keep b6 defended. But I'm imagining, like, if we play rook c2, there's queen b3, and f7 is a target.
But then you can play
Bishop d5, but then we lose a rook. So this is where it starts to get trickier, where you have to be aware of what the opponent wants to do. And the harder problems are positions where if you don't realize what the opponent wants to do, you can run into trouble. So rook c2, queen b3. I think there might be a simple approach in that position. I think you said queen d5?
Yeah.
If we play queen d5, we trade queens, or white could trade queens, and then save the bishop. So rook c2, queen b3. I think then we can just take the knight. In the sense we're defending f7 and keeping the initiative. And after white takes back, then we take on e2.
Yeah.
And then we're up a piece. White could damage the pawn structure, but we're still up a piece. I think black is much better there. So let's go for that. Hopefully we're not missing anything. Defend f7 by taking the knight. And then take here. Ooh, the line keeps going. White's threatening this checkmate on d8. How to defend. Knight d5 looks very attractive. I like knight d5. There's also bishop d5.
You can play bishop c6 attacking their bishop stopping me.
Well, the problem is bishop c6 doesn't defend against rook d8 mates.
Can you play knight c?
Or rook d8, winning the queen.
Yes.
I think it's a debate between bishop d5 and knight d5. I think a problem with bishop d5 is white could take twice on f6.
But knight d5, it can play f3.
But knight d5, we attack the queen.
Oh.
So we attack and we block the rook from targeting d8. I like knight d5. I'm going to go for it. Queen b8. That's a good sign. We're just trading queens. And success. So that was a little bit tricky. Like white had maybe a bit more attack than expected. I want to go back there just to show one line that maybe we didn't identify as clearly. But if we took the knight first, this was something we had to see ahead of time, where black could take on b6, and then we have no time to take the bishop because of rook d8. So let's keep going. We gained a lot of points for that problem. We're over 2,200.
Wait, in our position,
Yep.
if you play,
Oh, knight d5?
yeah.
Knight d5, attacking the queen, the bishop's attacked. So one of the issues here is that the computer is automatically turned on. I accidentally glanced at the move. There's one winning move for white in this position. And maybe, I don't know how the video is going to be edited, but yeah, queen take a6 is the move. I was going to say viewers at home can pause the video, but I guess it's too late. Queen take a6 is saving the queen and the bishop. Okay, let's continue. Weird position. Sometimes before you start looking for a move in the position, you should just make observations, like try and evaluate what's going on. In this case, white's last move, taking the pawn, does leave the bishop attacked twice, but now the knight is attacked. And I'm counting material. White just won a pawn here. So it's situation. Black is down material. The knight's attacked. What to do?
Maybe knight c3 and then take the bishop.
But if yeah, so situations like this where your knight's attacked and the bishop is attacked, you want to look for knight moves. You want to maybe get the most up for your knight and then later take the bishop. But knight c3, just bishop takes c3, right? Doesn't lead to much. Aha. So if we take on e5 and then knight takes c3, I think this is just a trade though, because queen takes c3.
Take the rook and then
You could take the rook, but black is not winning any material, and queens could get traded. I'm pretty sure I see the solution, and I'll try and again talk through my thought process. In a situation like this, it's really important to just consider the candidate moves and the forcing lines, which could lead to something in your favor. In this case, okay, we've identified some candidate moves. Knight takes c3, we rejected. This is a candidate move, and this is a candidate move. Do you have an idea?
I did, but then
Yeah.
it probably wasn't right.
Okay. And sometimes you, in addition to looking for candidate moves, you also want to look for potential ideas. Look for moves that maybe don't work in this current position, but might work in the future. So potential ideas that I spot are something maybe like rook d8, or maybe someday moving the knight to b4 or f4 to attack the queen. And sometimes when you build up an arsenal of both the candidate moves and the potential ideas in the position, you can start combining them to work towards finding a solution. In this case, one of the approaches I used was I just calculated rook take e5, rook take e5, and then I identified a relatively forcing move for black, which is not recapturing the rook, but playing this move that I kind of wanted to play earlier, was knight f4. And I think this is winning material. I think after rook take e5, knight f4, we attack the queen, and we're ready to recapture on e5, capture the rook on e5, and defend the knight on f4. And I don't think there's any counterplay for white to deal with that. I think black is just going up a knight. Agreed? Let's go for it. Ooh, forgot about this. I think it's simple though. I think we just take the rook, and there's no way for white to win back material. We don't take the queen though. If we take the queen, white takes our queen, and then we're not winning anything. It just trades. So we take the rook. Okay. Sorry? Okay. Yeah, perfect so far. More rating points gained. Queen c2. Black to move. And again, I encourage people to make observations before looking for moves. Equal material, this knight's a target. I think a major theme in this problem is taking advantage of this knight in some way. Yep. Queen g4 is definitely a candidate move.
And then after,
G3.
yeah.
G5.
G5.
Oh, yeah, 'cause, yeah.
So when I first look at this position, there's a few moves that jump out.
E5, knight.
Queen g4, g5, and e4. These are all probably the most aggressive moves to attack something. But it's a matter of making something work to win material. So this is what a lot of players will do, is they'll have an instinct of what the first move will be, and they'll play it without perhaps seeing the full variation. And that's sometimes the main reason why problems are solved incorrectly. I have a feeling queen g4 is not the first move. Simply because after queen g4, g3, the knight has a safe haven on g2. And we don't want to give white time to play g3, because I don't think we're trapping or winning anything after queen g4. I think there's a more effective approach here, which combines some of the resources. Yeah?
It's just like E4, bishop takes, and then queen
Queen g4. This would be a nice double attack. This line would be winning material. Yeah, very nice. But what if e4, bishop e2? No queen g4 there.
No, then you play G5.
Then we play g5. So it was actually just a matter of combining all the three different moves in the right order. E4, I think, is winning material here, because we take away the only safe square for the knight. We don't give white any time to play g3. And yeah, bishop e2, g5 would trap the knight. Let's go for it. Always feels good playing that final move. Okay, we are on the verge of breaking 2300. And problems might be getting tougher. This one looks really easy though. White to move.
It's just like
What would you play? Yeah.
Probably queen h6.
Ooh, queen h6.
queen takes C.
What would you play?
Queen takes C.
Queen takes c5. Actually, both moves look attractive. I think queen takes c5, it's just a free bishop.
Yeah.
If you want to play queen h6, you have to calculate. You're threatening mate, but bishop take d4. And black's alive. But I think it's just a free bishop. But of course, in chess, if you had the situation, if you see the free bishop, you would like to look for more. Maybe you would calculate queen h6. It doesn't lead to anything. So we take the bishop. And we take. Okay. No, what happened with the sound there? Yeah, that was relatively easy. I don't know.
It gained us 90.
So what's interesting about this tool is every puzzle has its own rating based on who solves it correctly and who solves it incorrectly. So the puzzle rating for this one is 1981, which I think a lot of people who tried to solve this probably played queen h6, not realizing the bishop is hanging. So that's maybe why this puzzle has a high rating.
Into the computer, like, you gotta stop. You stop.
Should I turn it off
No.
or turn it on? Queen h6?
Yeah. It's just-
Well, so we should always make our own conclusions before checking the stockfish.
No,
so-
is it even?
Oh, if queen h6, bishop take d4? I would guess that
The material?
it's relatively equal. Black might even be better there because there's a weak pawn on d4.
Or what if you take it through?
Oh, you could take with rook, yeah. It's probably about equal, equal material. Let's check. Bishop take d4,
Minus.
rook take d4.
Yes.
Slightly, I don't know why it's saying slightly better for black.
Bishop e6.
Maybe because the white king is a bit more exposed. Sometimes you can't always trust evaluations either. Or if it's giving, right. If it's giving like minus 0.1 or minus 0.3, sometimes it's something very minuscule that you have to understand what the computer is looking at. But okay, black does have some initiative here against the a2 pawn. Okay, let's continue. Continue. Interesting position. White is up 2 pawns, but there's a rook hanging on d1. But do we take it? You have an idea? Yeah? Yeah, so I think this is a whole decision. Like, it's clear at some point we want to take the rook, but what would the difference be? Because h3 we're forcing king h2. And then if we take the rook, then we actually have to ask ourselves, what is white doing to get counterplay? Because rook g5 looks scary, and it might not be so simple. So this might actually require calculation where we have to keep in mind this h3 move and calculate the position with h3 and without h3. I don't think there's any other like major candidate moves to consider here apart from h3 and queen take d1.
What if the rook took the pawn?
Oh, if we take the pawn, then rook take d6.
But you have
And then if we take, the queen would take back.
okay.
So since white has 2 defenders on the pawn, you can't take it right away because you only have 2 attackers. So this is a hard situation sometimes to be in your own game, where you can take material, but it's unclear. Like, you have to really think from your opponent's perspective. And here the whole question is, does white have a strong continuation?
Wait.
Yeah.
So h3, king to, then queen takes, and then if you play rook g5, then we can play king f3 or king f6.
King f6.
Because then if king takes, then we can play rook h1 or rook h8.
I see what you mean. So just to demonstrate the line, oh, you said h3 first, king h2 here, and after rook g5, king f6. That's very possible. So I'm thinking that if we go for a similar variation, like if we take the rook right away, and then rook g5, king f6, white would have the option of taking on h4. So after h3, king h2, queen take d1, rook g5, you're saying king f6.
Yeah, because you're obviously threatening.
Or we're threatening the rook. We're threatening king take g5. And white probably can't play f4 because of something like queen d2. And then the king gets in trouble. So I like the spirit of keeping, or trying to regain the initiative after rook g5. But what if the queen somehow defends, like queen c5? And now there's some threat of queen f5 or queen e5 mate. It looks a bit scary. Queen take d6 is possible. Okay, let's start from scratch. So h3, king h2, queen take d1, rook g5, king f6, queen c5, and then you said queen take d6. And now white has perhaps a few checks. let's say queen f5 check. You would play king e7,
Yeah.
queen e4 check.
Queen, queen, no.
Queen e6, and then there's rook e5.
Yeah, probably king f8.
So you would play king f8.
Yeah.
And this is after queen e4. And yeah, it looks like white runs out of checks. Still looks a bit shaky, but
I guess last a lot.
maybe there's rook h5 in that position. And then there's a threat of some rook h8 check.
But the rook's on D. Rook's on D8.
The rook's where?
On D8, right?
The rook's on d8, but the king's on f8.
Oh.
Does everyone follow that? That's a hard line to follow.
Queen's
Let's repeat one more time. h3. And this is sometimes where visualization is a really key skill to have, where it's really important to keep track of where all the pieces are. So you're seeing the position clearly, even if it's several moves ahead. So h3, king h2, queen take d1, rook g5, oops,
Wait, I have a
king f6.
Okay. We can just play queen h8. We can just play queen h6 because there's no rook h8. Rook h5 checks.
Said queen h6 because there's no, wait, in what position?
Okay,
So,
h3,
okay, so you say the line. h3, king h2,
queen takes
mhm, rook g5.
and king h6.
Oh, king h6. Still, actually king h6 might make a lot of sense, but maybe then f4? It's sometimes hard in these situations because there's so many different ways a position can branch out.
Then technically couldn't you do queen takes d6
Yeah.
with tempo?
After king h6.
Yeah.
That's our threat. Oh, after f4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And then the king appears to be safe. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, so can I see the line?
Yeah,
So-
sure.
So h3, and then there, and then take the rook, and then check, and then you go to f6,
Mm-hmm.
and then when queen goes to c5,
Mm-hmm.
can you just play queen f3 for any?
Queen f3. But then there's queen e5, mate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you defend f5, but e5 is also a major target. I actually like the line where we're going to h6, where it just seems safer for the king. So h3, king h2, queen take d1, rook g5, king h6, because we're still attacking the rook. We are blocking the h file, but I don't know if that's too important. Given that we're just up a rook, we're threatening g5, we're threatening d6.
What if queen c3?
Queen c3 after king h6.
Or not queen c3, I mean. Oh, wait, no. It doesn't work.
Okay, so one more time. We'll play a move very soon because at some point we might not be 100% confident, but we'll give it our best our best try. I guess the question is, why don't we take the rook immediately and go for the same line? Probably because pawn take pawn, right? But then
But
then we can still take on d6.
then queen g4.
So I'm wondering if there's a different resource for white. I mean, my first instinct is h3, but here, take, rook here. Is there anything else other than rook g5? Probably not. King h6. I think we should just go for it. I will say I'm not 100% confident. Sometimes there's like hidden resources in these tactics which are easy to overlook, but spending a lot of time on this, let's go for h3. We can always think if the position changes unexpectedly. Ooh. Should we try again? Or yeah, let's actually try again. Given I'm a bit baffled. It's probably queen take d1. Or maybe is there another move? F6 doesn't make quite sense.
Why don't you play h3 after king h6?
Sorry, you said queen take d1, but then it's white's move.
But what can you do if after queen c4, 5, and you play h3, and then king takes and you play queen h?
Sorry, what's the first move?
Okay, so rook takes d1.
Queen take d1,
Or queen takes d1.
rook g5.
d5, king h6.
Oh, we're keeping the resource of h3 for later, but I don't know how that changes anything.
But then
Guess you
queen
need
queen
to
h3, queen
tempo
h3, rook
it.
g8, queen h3, rook g8.
Oh, you're saying rook g8.
No,
Um,
so, okay, so queen takes d1.
so queen take d1,
Check.
which I think we can assume is a move.
That's better.
It's just
Can
Let's play it. Queen take d1. Okay. Queen c3.
just queen takes d6.
Well, there's discover check possibilities. This is maybe a resource we missed in the other line,
rook e6.
where after queen c3, it might be important for some reason to have our pawn on h4 rather than h3.
Oh, because then I can play rook takes d6.
Not probably king f8.
So, okay, so we have to identify the threat. We're up a rook. The threat is rook g5, and then the eventual queen g7. And that's a double check threat. So if we play a move like queen take d6, rook g5 is a double check, and we're, I think it's losing, because there's a lot of follow-up for white.
Play the line that plays rook g5.
Sorry, rook.
Play rook g5
Can I play rook g5?
after, before queen c6.
Oh, but the computer played this automatically. So we have to figure out the best move for black in this position.
King f8.
King f8 is a move. So f6, still rook g5,
Then just move the king.
No, then.
and then we move the king.
What after rook g5? Can you just play queen takes g5? Or king takes g5?
What?
Sorry?
You play king f6, right?
No, we said f6.
Oh,
Yeah. King f6, I don't think so. So f6 is a candidate move. I like I like the nature of f6. We block the diagonal. But after rook g5, king to f7, I think white is winning after queen c4.
Yeah.
King f8 and rook g8 mate.
Probably king f8.
So you're saying king f8 here.
Yeah.
But then.
So, and then rook h5 not possible.
No,
Hmm.
then queen takes f6 check.
Oh, wow. You know what? After king f8, white to move, mate in 2,
Oh, rook
queen
e8.
takes f6.
No, no,
rook e8. King f8 runs into rook e8 mate, or rook e8 and then queen h8 mate. So I think, okay, just to identify, the mistake that we made was not seeing this resource of queen c3 earlier. And this is the best line for black. It's just a question, how does black defend this position? We're up a rook. Lines with f6,
maybe king g8.
I don't think,
Oh, no,
okay, we didn't consider everything. King g8, there's rook g5.
king g6.
King g6. We have not considered king g6 yet.
Because your pawn takes these more than queen to g4.
If, yeah. But if king g6, does white have a continuation? It still looks scary, but
There's no queen checks.
Yeah,
there's no queen checks. I'm just fearing there could be a quiet move like queen e3. Sorry, rook take d6, queen, or let's say rook g5,
Rook g5 and rook box.
but your
No,
king's on
it's
g6.
not.
No, I thought you said the queen's on c3.
Yeah,
So
but-
we said, okay, so the line is king g6, queen e3. You said rook take d6, and then rook g5.
Rook blocks him. I don't know.
If rook take d6 immediately, there's double check. We're almost, this is almost our time limit. So it might be most time effective to
Let's just go king.
to just see the solution. King g6 you want to play. I think this gives us the best hope. If this were a game and my time is ticking and I have like 1 minute left, I would play king g6. Because then if white plays queen e3,
Play f6.
there should be some defenses, maybe f6 there. But I'm not entirely sure. Let's try king g6 and then we'll try and understand the solution at least. King g6, wow, it worked. Now f6 or maybe even queen g4.
Queen g4.
No, queen d4 loses. No, never mind.
I'm still baffled of why we want our pawn on h4 rather than including h3.
Wait, if queen d4, then f3.
Then queen takes g3.
Oh, yeah.
That might be the reason. If we had our pawn on h3 and we played queen g4, f3 could just be a really strong move for white. And maybe that's why we had to keep our pawn on h4. Let's play queen g4,
Probably here.
and there we go. That was really difficult. That was beyond my level. That's probably
39.
oh, the puzzle rating is 2339. Yeah. Well, I wonder if
Wait, what game?
maybe some people have a 50-50 chance of getting this. This is a game between two 1900s. And they just stumbled into like a really complex line. Just to demonstrate the line where if queen, or if h3 first, how do we go back? Wait a minute. Oh, in this position. If h3 first, king here, queen take d1. I think the first mistake initially was neglecting to consider one of white's strongest resources, queen c3. It's a hard move to identify, especially when you're black and you're searching for resources for your opponent. Sometimes you'll be inclined not to search hard enough. But yeah, queen c3, because there's so many of these mating ideas, like king f8, rook e8 is such a nice resource for white. And if the same line happened where king g6, queen g4, or sorry, king g6, queen e3, queen g4, I think this is the one nuance, f3. I'll check with the computer, yeah. I think white should be much better here given the queen is driven away from defending g5. Yeah, well, Stockfish loves white. If we go back, rook take d6 could be drawn. I guess that's the other thing. In some of these lines, there's perpetuals for white. Like rook take d6, white is getting enough counterplay to draw. But I'm pretty sure that winning line was the only way to win, to take the rook first and leave the pawn on h4. And a lot of this can be hard to calculate. Now there's a pretty clear perpetual. That was difficult, but that's one of the reasons I enjoy doing this. Is some of these problems are really tough, and if we compare this to weightlifting, it's like lifting really heavy weights, and they're tough, and you might not be able to lift them at first, but that's how you get stronger. And the more you do, even if you fail or solve incorrectly a lot, if you go back and try and realize the nuances and try and take away themes, that's how you become a better tactician. That's what will ultimately improve your game. So I think we'll end it there. Sad to end it on a failed tactic, but I would encourage everyone to do this on your own and try and be accurate and take your time and dig deep.